Welcome to Inside the Collective, where we dig into the thinking behind how people work. A quick note before we get started, this is one of our origin sessions. 6 early conversations recorded when the show was still finding its shape. It's grown since then, but the thinking in these still holds up. If you want, jump to Season 1, Episode 1, or stick around for this origin session. Production's a little rougher, but the conversation's worth it. Let's get started.
I'm Libbi. I'm based here in Australia. I have been working in the broad development industry for over 20 years now. I'm a proud mother of 2 young boys who keep it really real for me. It's been a really interesting journey up until now, joining the Carrot Collective, and I'm really excited to kind of see what happens. And I guess you'll probably learn a little bit more about me in the questions. So don't want to start with, any shocks too early.
How would you describe the work that you do to someone that has never heard of place strategy or urban development?
Well, look, I think that the work that I want to do and like to do is the creation of destinations. And that is, I think a lot of that is built in coming from my multidiscipline background, kind of using my background in marketing and brand, and in design management and experience design. And I think it's more about creating the destination versus the place or the space itself. I'm sure we all have favorite destinations, and everything can be a destination if we want it to be.
What would some of the projects that you've delivered be like, just so that we get an understanding of what those destinations look like for what you create?
I've done a lot of different work, and they're at different phases. So I've worked very, very upstream on the creation of a new city in New South Wales, and setting the place sort of vision and strategy for that. That was in a bid environment. So that was quite a big one, but also at the same time, I was lucky enough to work alongside Nathan on a university here in Queensland, and that was under construction, but it was still around getting the student experience and the staff experience, and also engaging more with the local community. So it kind of is place, or it's sector agnostic. So I've worked across most sectors now. I've worked on 8 or 6 airports across the globe in a wayfinding capacity, leading the kind of navigation and customer experience strategy for those. So it's pretty diverse.
Cities to airports. Wow, that's huge. When you think back on your earlier, think back to earlier in your career, what advice would you give yourself about working in complex, evolving industries like property development?
Look, my number one rule is always be prepared for a meeting. It's really, really simple. I think I always strive to be the most prepared person in the room. I don't pretend to know what everyone. There's a lot of different specialists in the room often, and I just need to ensure that I'm really prepared so I can have really good conversation and active conversation and build trust and relationships early. So I think, I live by that now. So I've been shocked where I've walked into meetings before not prepared, and it's never feels good.
So tell me what prepared looks like to you.
I like to understand who's in the room and what they're bringing to the table. I like to understand if there's multiple people, as part of the company that I'm working for, that I understand what my role is. And I like to ask kind of 3 kind of critical questions, which is around what does success look like to them? If the project fails, what have they got to lose? And what are the things that are keeping them up at night? And those kind of 3 questions give me a really solid foundation for navigating the complexities of the project, and going back to reminding, clients what success look like, and also then reminding the teams, the design teams that I'm working with, what we've got to lose if we get it wrong. So it just gives some really good parameters. I don't ask them word for word like that, but ultimately try to understand those kind of three core things.
Trying to think of a situation where those three questions wouldn't help, and I'm struggling.
Totally. And I can't tell you how many times it's got me out of a sticky situation with some, okay clients.
I see you have a very refined sense of diplomacy.
I think it's part and parcel of having to also be a woman in the property industry and shoulder up into some of those meetings. So diplomacy is my friend.
Nice. All right. I love that. I love that. So when you're helping a project balance with the market demands, what the community needs, and what's financially viable, what process do you follow to find the best path through that?
Look, I think kind of following on from the question before, I look to build trust and relationships early on. It gives me more permission to have those conversations and push for the right outcomes throughout the project. I have been working on really pulling apart and understanding the full development life cycle. And so just last week, I sat down with a quantity surveyor. And for those who don't know what a quantity surveyor is, they're the ones creating the cost plans very early on in the development for feasibility, how much a client can expect to spend. And I just wanted to understand what goes into that, what thinking, what kind of models and that they use. But then I interrogated her to try to find out how we might be able to bring in the non-tangibles into a cost plan early on, things like experience, things like visitation, whatever. Obviously, each project will have different metrics, but it would be really great if we could start to get those kind of non-tangibles, but super, super important social measurements, cultural measurements, experience measurements, brand even. So look, that's kind of always in the back of my mind. But ultimately, the industry has always worked on assumption. And what worked in the last project, they'll often do again. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work again, but trying to get developers to do things differently is really, really difficult. So I try to understand what their pressure points and their language is so that I can breadcrumb them towards the right outcome.
You mentioned building trust is super important. How do you go about building trust with a prickly pear personality?
Oh, language. I try to talk many, many languages. So I have learnt to really understand the vernacular around commerciality and feasibility and design. And by speaking their language and also really understanding the person, that tends to help me kind of navigate through those different complexities, especially with many, many stakeholders. There's so many stakeholders in a big development that I look just to understand the different language and what each of them have got to lose, really. And it helps build that kind of trust. And pick up the phone. If it gets really prickly, pick up the phone. Understand what's going on. Often I've learned all too late the issues that are actually going at hand, which is influencing some of the decisions they're making. And if I had have known them earlier, the decisions I could have navigated and created better outcomes. So, if it's money, I need to know about it. If it's board level pressure, we need to know about it and we understand what pressure they're under and help them navigate it.
What sort of techniques or skill set would you leverage to get beyond the words that are being said and uncover the meaning or the hidden non-discussed items in a conversation?
Just being human. I mean, I take a really personal approach. I'm a pretty intuitive person. I like to build relationships. Ultimately, I've always seen my role partly to really make the client look like a rock star. I mean, ultimately, that's what we're often there to do. And so we're human. We've got things going on. And I think that, you know, it's pretty simple for me. That's kind of how I go about doing it. And then, connecting the dots, as I said, understanding the languages that have been talked about and connecting all those different dots and threading the fabric together. I think often, whether I was working in a wayfinding lead capacity or in an experience design or destination design capacity, often we find ourselves right at the middle of everything. And so it's quite a unique opportunity where we are talking to everyone and able to kind of thread things through and push things through. So just building the relationships.
Feels like empathy plays a big part in what you do.
But yeah, hugely. But I mean, I live my life like that. I mean, I want to treat others the way I want to be treated. And life and people are messy, and often we have to design for that as well. So yeah, absolutely.
What changes are you seeing, whether in housing, climate pressures, or how people want to live, that are shaping how new developments are planned?
Oh, not enough. It's really hard. Look, that the city that I was talking about previously, I mean, you never really get that honor or the opportunity of creating a new city. And, even early on in a bid context, we were making sacrifices of life very early on. And so I think it's a top-down approach. I don't think we've, at a policy level, we are making any brave or innovative choices. And, I think that because of this, the market conditions and the struggles to make these projects stack up commercially and financially means that, without really a policy or, a top-down approach to pushing them towards, making sure they achieve, a percentage of affordable housing, whatever it might be, I feel like that's the only way to kind of get the needle to, kind of move a little bit. But then, Brad, that not everyone's created equally. And I've worked with some incredible developers that are looking to do things differently. And ultimately, I'm always looking to find ways to create better social and cultural and environmental outcomes that help raise revenue as well, and diversifying their own financial models.
How do you guide someone who's very cautious towards brave and innovative implementations?
Some you just can't. And I think ultimately, they're the sort of the non-values aligned clients that I tend, honestly wouldn't feel that the investment of the type of work that, I'm often doing is really worthwhile. So, you really have to get the right values aligned client. But again, it's education. And I think it's the breadcrumbing that I've talked about before. If I'm educating them along the way, it means that they can take it up to board levels and confidently sell these things in. But ultimately also just, again, those questions right up front, knowing what some of their biggest pressure points are, means that we're constantly understanding that when we're trying to design the outcomes.
You mentioned certain clients and that fit. I think across the network, it's probably a universal truth that the cultural fit with clients is critical to a successful outcome. What are the things that you have found successful in vetting a client before you jump in to make sure that there's an alignment there?
It can be really hard. People can talk a really good game early on, but you can also look at their consultant team, like the caliber of the team that they're surrounding themselves with. And ultimately, again, by kind of understanding those kind of critical and fundamentals up front, we can kind of understand a little bit more about how to push them towards, bravery and innovation, and again, really ensuring that I'm speaking a language that they understand and is meaningful to them.
Feels like translation is a huge part of your job.
It's a huge part of my job. And I think in the more, really in the last 5 years, I've been looking to really find ways to use the evidence that's in front of us, whether that be economic, whether that be market type information, and translate that towards better outcomes for people. So translation's a huge part of it.
When you feel, shifting away from the logistics of it, but when you're feeling, say, overwhelmed or unfocused, or you've temporarily kind of lost your way or vision for a project, what strategies or mental models do you turn to help yourself get back on track?
Look, I usually call Nathan. I vent and look, I mean, taking a breather, the 24-hour test is always a really good one. Pick up the phone, speak to the client, understand what's going on, as tough as that can be, and as much as I often don't want to do it. Again, just getting to the crux of what's actually going on and why things are not progressing. And if it's not the clients, it's talking to the architects or the consultant team to understand what's going on their end, because often if the lead consultant is an architect and they're struggling with the client, then it's going to be really hard to have really collaborative working environment with them as well. So I think it's just about kind of trying to understand the environment in which we're working in. I don't think I've got necessarily a strategy around that, but I think it's just trying to get to the bottom of what's going on and why. But, but I do still call Nathan and vent. That's one of my...
We'll put Nathan's number up at the end so that everyone in the collective can just ring Nathan when they need to vent. You've mentioned research a couple of times. So when you're translating complex research into real world plans for developers, what approaches have you found most effective for making those ideas clear and actionable?
Look, I think, research can be a bit of a dirty word sometimes, and it's often comes certainly to property developers as big dollar signs, which they don't tend to like to see early on. And so, look, my focus has been really working with the information we have at hand. If they've already done a lot of work, they are good at their jobs. There is market information out there. There is macroeconomic data. There's demographic data out there. It's about then taking what's available to us and putting it through the lens of, experience and more human-centered outcomes. And I think by doing that, it's a much more leaner and quicker approach. It starts to set the trust early, and it means that often I find I can have much more successful conversations around doing actual audience research, whether it be ethnographic or behavioural or whatever is required, depending on the problem we're trying to solve. We get to that point, especially if we're at a sticky point. I had a client that was going through something called a state significant design process here in Australia. They'd gone through the first panel. They were not looking like they were going to get a good outcome. And it was a different typology. It was something called a build to rent and a hotel put together in a commercial zoning area in Sydney. And so we very quickly got on board and did concept validation work. But they were already so far down the track that the problem was well and truly in front of them. And the money and time that had been spent to date, you kind of pushed their hand. And so in that case, we can move into real audience insights to truly understand what people want, what their unmet needs are, and design for them, whether that be physical or service or operational type design outcomes. That conversation is much easier to have. The problem's already there. When we're much earlier on and they're just trying to get the feasibility to stack up, then we're looking at lean ways to try to build the evidence base behind making good decisions for humans.
In that experience, what did you learn about navigating complexity or change?
To hold things really lightly. I mean, I think it has to be adaptable. I know that we're talking about bricks and mortar and walls and things that are really solid and physical, but ultimately, we have to be able to adapt. And so whether that's the service layer that goes in, whether it's an experience layer that goes into the built environment, I think we just need to be able to work within the confines, depending on where we're at, but also build out other areas. Like I was working on a big residential mixed use, and the research and the work I was doing was creating a new strata model or a body corporate model so that they can look at other ways to generate revenue through their buyers that don't necessarily mean it affects the price of the apartment itself. And that then also fed into seeding community early. When it's a 10-stage development and you've got multiple people coming on board, they're also living in construction zones, seeding that kind of community is important. Looking at different subscription type models is important. And we just need to find other ways to make that feasibility stack up rather than, them losing some either vital space or something they really need in the actual physical space.
You mentioned holding on to things lightly. Given we all work in creative, passionate spaces, that can be challenging to hold on to something lightly opposed to holding on to, till the very end. What do you do to make a decision as to when it's right to fight for something and when it's right to hold it lightly or let it go and move on to a different negotiating point?
It usually comes down to it's the powers of deduction, really. If we're really clear on the vision, we're really clear on what success looks like, we're navigating ourselves towards that, then, very quickly I've learnt that when we're thinking about, say, design or human interventions, I very quickly test that with architects or other interior designers, whoever I'm working with, to really understand the viability of that stacking up. Recently, for this city that I was talking about, I ended up working with an economist to quantify visitation. So the idea was that the developer should be, and actually the development authority should be, putting money towards creating a team lab type experience. And what that kind of big move, whilst it's very, very costly early on, it was about trying to quantify the visitation and what that was going to bring to the city and how that city was going to grow. And so, I think no idea is necessarily a bad idea, but you just got to do a bit of your own due diligence to make sure that it's kind of going to stack up and you can go into that meeting and have a really solid conversation. That went in, and I know that it was the only question that came back on the play strategy was understanding how we quantified visitation and the revenue that could be generated through an experience in a destination like that. So it's good. That to me is good. They're reading it.
Right, that they're picking up on that particular point. Talking about teams, what patterns have you noticed in teams or projects that are truly successful in creating human-centered places compared to those that appear to be community-focused, only appear to be community-focused on the surface?
Collaboration's really, really important. There's no one party that ever designs these types of things. It takes everyone to kind of come together, and that's hard sometimes to create environments on that, because we're all working to different timelines, to different consultancy agreements, to different outcomes. But I think that if we can all get ourselves aligned, then it means that we can, help to get those better outcomes for the community. And a lot of the work, the early research work that I've been involved in when we're looking at just sort of basic desktop research, is understanding some of the wicked problems and the trends in response, so that we can help kind of put a bit of a future focus on some of the decisions that we're making as well, and be a bit more global in our thinking than just looking at the kind of the micro of what's happening in that particular area, especially important in Australia. We're pretty conservative.
I noticed in your LinkedIn bio, and you've just used the term there again, a wicked problem. I haven't heard that phrase before reading it in your bio. Can you enlighten me on that a bit, what a wicked problem is?
Look, the wicked problem, one of the wicked problems that we have spent so much time trying to design for, is social isolation, especially after COVID. That is something that is being felt, I think, across the globe. We're not designing for people to come together. We're not creating those systems as well as we should in a built environment kind of sense. So that is one. I mean, another wicked problem is obviously climate. That comes up time and time again, and resilience. And then cost of living is another. They're the really big kind of wicked ones that we look to understand the macro side of things and bring a local context to it. So I was working for a religious organization, which obviously, as they own so much land, they were doing a really big mixed-use development, and in a really, really multicultural part of Sydney. And we really found that it wasn't necessarily the people on the lower economic side, and it wasn't necessarily the people on the higher sort of economic side. It's the people in the middle that were missing out on all of the government support and subsidies, because they're just making just a little bit too much. And they are usually working 3 or 4 jobs. And so we're trying to kind of, we were trying to design things to support them in earning a living whilst getting the right types of support when they're kind of in that missing bit of, getting the support from, whether it's a childcare subsidy or whether it be actual, government money. Oh, I can't even think of the word. What's the word? So yeah, it's real.
Let's switch it up just a little bit. So what's one belief or habit or mindset that you've adopted in the past few years that has the biggest positive impact on your work life?
Learning to say no and not being afraid of it. I think whether that be no in my personal life or no in a work sense. Again, I think we've talked about it a little bit, but not everything's created equally, and actually not everything is worth saying yes to. There's a lot of strings attached to that. So that's been definitely a big one, but also just really backing my intuition and being empathetic. It's who I am, and so why would I not be like that in a work environment as well? My greatest pleasure is creating environments for people to thrive in a work setting as well. It's the most beautiful thing to watch people doing their best work, and if I can enable it by working with clients to enable them to do really great jobs that they're proud of, work that they're proud of, then it's a really great outcome.
Such a beautiful sentiment in that, like creating an environment for everyone to be their best selves. Yeah, that's beautiful. So, in your experience, what are the best ways for creative teams like Partners at Character Collective can work alongside you to strengthen projects and extend the impact of a place strategy?
Oh, um,
Just a short one.
yeah, there's a lot of questions in that, I feel. um, Look, I think it's just collaboratively. I mean, the property industry or built environment industry often works in a siloed way, and it just doesn't create the best outcomes. And so where we can bring the smartest people in the room in their given, like whatever their given expertise is, to create the best possible outcomes, then why wouldn't we? I mean, I have no problems not knowing the answer, and I'm really happy to call someone who knows better than me to answer those types of questions and bring them in on the project. I think it's kind of often one of my superpowers is to bring the right people together to solve the problem. And then, like I said, try to create those environments for them to thrive in.
If you're looking 5 to 10 years ahead, what shifts do you think we'll see in how people experience places, whether that's cities, neighborhoods, or digital spaces?
It's a really hard one to answer. I'd love to think that we're seeing something very different to what we're seeing today, but I'm worried we're not. But I think that's a very Australian probably way of looking at it. I think there's some really great things happening globally. There's some real innovative change and great social outcomes that are happening within communities around the world. And I think as long as we keep learning from those and keep pushing for that change and bringing bits of that through the work that we do, then that's a really, really great outcome. But I mean, I'd love to see some more innovative policy change so that we're pushing the hand, really. But otherwise, just keep advocating. Just keep advocating.
So, for those of us that want to learn more, who's getting it right? Where do we look to learn?
Oh, I don't know whether it's a who's getting it right. I think we need to look at places where we feel good in and places that are bringing people together. Like I've, one case or benchmark that I spent quite a bit of time researching was Domino Park in New York. I've never been there, but the way in which they've threaded in community, environmental, learning, beautiful outdoor spaces, culture, it was just that to me as a benchmark. But I haven't been there, so I can't sort of get that sense. But from a benchmark perspective, that looked amazing. And so I think there's lots of great work being done. But ultimately, you know a really good space when you're there. You remember it, you want to go back. It's got destinational qualities. It makes you feel safe. It makes you feel joyful and happy. It makes you want to share it with your friends and family. Those to me are the really good markers of a great place.
So, if you could time and space travel right now, where is the place that Libby would feel best in?
In a city or in a
Wherever you want to pop up, it just exists.
Gosh, there's a lot. I think a place that surprised me the most was Damascus in Syria. That was the most unbelievable experience because I just saw so much peace there and so much tradition and culture. And I loved the rhythm of the place. And it shocked me because I'd come from Aleppo, which was quite the opposite. But it's just totally different. And I saw real, raw, pure kindness in a place where, everyone's telling you to really watch your back. And you do watch your back. But, that was amazing. And I feel sad that I probably will never go back.
I love hearing about that. That's makes me want to go, but also the last little bit, maybe not so much.
You should go. It's amazing.
I just want to be respectful of your time. I know we're kind of coming up to our end, so we're trying to make a bit of a tradition here with our closing question. What would you do if you weren't afraid?
Ah, what would I do? I think I've written a whole list of things that I would do in my journal that I would do if I wasn't afraid. I would choose to say yes to all the things that honestly really bring me joy and not question whether or not I should be doing them. I think the freedom of doing what you want to do is such a amazing thing, but I feel like a lot of us, there's always something that holds us back somewhere along the way. So, I'd love to just take my kids out of school and go travel the world and finance, money not be an option, but all those things are really hard to do right now. But, so I think it's just being brave and saying yes.
Libby, I want to say thank you so much for your time, your insights, and welcome to the Carrot Collective. I believe you're about 3.5 months in, so welcome.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride so far. It's been good. Thank you.